Okay, so per the usual, I'm going to be calling two roles. The first role will be the names of the committee members and alternates of committee members. After each name is called, the person should say here so we can make sure their mics are working. I'm also going to note that Kathy Sharkey is a member of ACUS and on the regulation committee, but for purposes of this project, AI and retrospective review, she will only be participating as the project consultant. The second roll of names will be ACUS members who are not on the committee. In similar fashion, please unmute yourselves and say here so we can make sure your microphone is working. So we'll start with our committee chair, Eloise Paskoff.
Here.
Thank you. Catherine Allen. Yes. James Ming Chen. I don't see him yet. Sean Ford, alternate for Dan Cohen.
Here.
Thank you. Clay Cook. You're here, Clay. There you go.
Here.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Jen Dickey.
Here.
Great. Thank you. Erica Hoff.
Here.
Great. Thank you. Erica Litzen.
Here.
Thank you. Jeff Rosen. Don't see him yet. Sid Shapiro.
Here.
Perfect. Thank you. Peter Strauss.
Here.
Thank you. Jonathan Weiner. You are joining right now.
Okay.
Jonathan Weiner. You could just unmute yourself. And
Here.
Perfect.
Yes,
thank you.
I'm working on that as we speak right now.
Brian Harris, alternate for Marion Zobler.
Here.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else on the Committee on Regulation who's here, whose name I did not call? All right, seeing none, I'm going to turn to ACUS members, not on the committee and alternate. Again, please unmute yourself and say here. Our project consultant, Kathy Sharkey.
Here.
Great, thank you. Matt Weiner is not on yet, but will be joining. Are there any other ACUS members either on the committee or not on the committee whose names I did not call? Okay, seeing none, I'm just going to recognize that our chair, Andrew Foyce, is also here.
Hello, everyone. I look forward to your work today. Thank you for participating.
Great. Thank you, Andy. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Eloise, who will read through our standard meeting protocol, and then we'll get this discussion started.
Sounds great. Thanks, Kaja, and hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here to start us off on our second meeting on this really interesting project. So let me start by reading our standard meeting protocols. Please note that only ACUS members, including government members, public members, senior fellows, liaison representatives, and special counsels, whether or not on the committee, and their designated alternates, have full speaking privileges. To avoid background noise, I'll ask that you keep your microphone on mute and either use Zoom's hand raise feature or add a comment in the chat identifying that you would like to speak, if you'd like to speak. I'll then call on you and you can unmute yourself. Please then remute yourself when you're done. I'll also ask that where possible, ACUS members and their designated alternates use the webcam to facilitate our conversation. With respect to attendees other than ACUS members and alternates, participation requires the unanimous consent of the committee members. Time permitting, I'll consider calling on such attendees at appropriate points and will presume that committee members consent absent their raising an objection. If any such participant would like to speak, please so indicate in the chat feature or by using Zoom's hand raise feature and wait to speak until I call on you. You can then unmute yourself and then please remute yourself when you're done speaking. For all participants, please use the chat feature only to indicate that you'd like to speak. or for committee members and their alternates to vote when asked. Please don't hold any sidebar discussions or put substantive comments in the chat feature. Only members of the Regulation Committee, including government members and their designated alternates, public members, senior fellows, liaison representatives, and special counsels have a vote. Please do not vote unless you're a member of the committee, and we have a list of committee members in case you are unsure. Thus completes my reading of the official script, and I am now happy to turn to our discussion of the proposed recommendations. So, Kaja, are we turning back to you to get everything set up on the screen? Perfect. So last time that we met, we worked our way through, I believe it was the first 6 of the recommendations. And so I don't think we should go through and redo them all, but I see that we have a few questions still, comments still in the side there. And so Kaja, maybe can you just tell us if any of those, are they relevant to the overall? I don't think we're up to the title yet, so we can stay. Okay. Yeah. No, I was on the page that you were on. I saw a few comments there, and I was just trying to situate us with whether this is an outstanding.
Yes. Yes, they both are. So we had discussed at the last meeting whether there were opportunities for explainability or interpretability in number 5. This wasn't edited too much, and I think ACUS staff thinks that this is sufficient. But wanted to keep it open if there was any specific language that anybody wanted to include here. And similarly, we also had a question on whether agencies, should agencies that use algorithmic tools to support retrospective review develop generally applicable policies governing how they acquire and use such tools and make them publicly available on their websites or otherwise. And this was also not answered at our last meeting. So,
okay. Great. Great. So thanks, Peter. I will recognize you. I think you are on mute still. If you
could,
yeah.
Sorry. Thank you. My past experience with incorporated by reference rules revealed unmistakably that an enormous number of redundant rules which ought to be excess, are, or at least at the time we did that work, were still on the books. There were rules that were 30, 40 years old. And so I think it would be really useful, helpful, I'd even almost say essential, to have in the recommendation and in the opening comments some specific mention that rules that have been incorporated by reference are a particular target or should be a particular target of the algorithm. Because all that you get on the agency's rule book is ANSI standard 3675-A-6 is incorporated by reference.
So thank you so much for that, Peter. Kaja, can you make a note when we go to the preamble that we should discuss that with whatever we do now? Let's scroll up to number 1, where while I don't think we are going to go through everything line by line again, right. Number 1 is the overview. And so I wonder if that's something that would go there in number 1. And Kathy, can I recognize you as the consultant to start either framing a response or thinking if there's some language? Peter, did I just see your hand go back up though? Did you want to?
Because if we're talking about number 1, there was, I think, would be useful also to add to the list of things in number 1, conflict with more recent rules.
Okay, so let's get that, both of those items on the screen, maybe from Kaja, and then maybe Kathy, I'll recognize you after Kaja does her typing so that she can stay present on both of those things.
say conflict with current rules, Peter?
With, well, I said more recent, but current is more recent, I think, gets into the.
Yeah, let's stay with more recent because the other ones are also current. They're just old.
Yep.
Peter, is there some language you wanted to propose that could fit into one about targets? Because this is where we're sort of talking about the targets.
Okay.
And so if I think your suggestion would fit here.
This recommendation specifically includes standards that have been incorporated by reference.
So just add another sentence at the end.
Mm-hmm. No, standards that have been incorporated by reference.
Okay, thanks for that, Peter. Kaja, I think rather than addresses in line 45, I think Peter said includes. And Kathy, can we turn to you on both of these suggestions?
Yeah, I think they're great suggestions. Hi, Peter. Nice to
Hi.
see you. So it's interesting in the report, I'm not suggesting this goes in, I'm just talking about things in the report that support that. Our interview with the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, so it's on page 40 of the report. There's a mention in the report, they talk to us a lot about, for that particular agency, regulations incorporating standards by reference is a huge issue and something where they would have welcomed this technology. What is surprising, Peter, just for edification, like apart from there, and the pilots talk about, HHS, where they had deployed this and talked a lot about broken citations and outdated regulations, et cetera. I think if it was really just BSEE who specifically hammered this point. So it's interesting to me that it didn't come up.
That may well be, Kathy, but the Coast Guard still has, as far as I know, it certainly did when the ACUS addressed incorporated by reference, the requirement that medical kits on every ship include a poison that had something that had been really overtaken. The ANSI standard, the American National Standards Institute, ANSI's standards are that every standard is to be revisited every 5 or 10 years, depending on the kind of standard that it is. That happens, but the standard that is incorporated by reference continues to be the standard that it once was.
Right.
Thanks. Yeah, and this is really the cleanup that this recommendation could affect.
Right.
The change would really be helpful here.
Yeah. So again, the report pages 40 to 41. So I'm just looking back at it, like BSEE regulations incorporate approximately 125 industry standards. Each of these industry standards can be upwards of 300 pages and tens of thousands of word long, often way longer than their entire regulatory text. They're supposed to be updated, yada, yada. So I entirely agree. I think
you could add, if that report is not yet in final form, you could add and either frequently or always are subject to periodic reevaluation under the rules of the standard setting organization.
Right. Let me just ask if there's anybody else who'd like to speak on this addition to recommendation 1. I'm looking for hands or a comment in the chat that you'd like to be recognized. Okay, so I think let's move on. Peter, you had mentioned that you had, so we ended at 6, so we're about, Jennifer, thank you, Jennifer Dick, I recognize you. The hand features, before I call on you, let me just say the hand features are under reactions at the bottom of the screen, and if you click reactions, you'll get a number of things that you could use, including the bottom one is raise hand, but I'm happy to recognize people in the chat as well. So
I do have one for 6. But
sure, Peter, I'll call on you in a minute. Let me just recognize Jennifer on number 1.
Thanks. Sorry. So I had just a question about conflict with more recent rules, because I know I know here we're not focused on like we're focused on more of like, I don't know how you ministerial type errors, but I think of like the first thought that came to my mind was like State Farm and agencies having to explain their reasons for a new rule when they conflict with older rules. And I was just wondering if there's any concern about phrasing this as like conflict with more recent rules, if that's sort of gonna have implications for State Farm review of new rules, or if there's a way to be more focused on, I guess, what the conflict is and what type of like conflict we're looking at here.
Thanks for that. Peter, do you want to say something about the language? I think you're the one who introduced the conflict language. Is there
no, I mean, what I have in mind, and it may be that it's sufficiently dealt with looking at standards, but an agency may over here adopt a specification, let's say, for the proper concentration of a given chemical in this setting. But there was, in a different setting, a different provision for the concentration of that chemical. And somehow that didn't get picked up and revisited.
And is that an issue that is primarily or only connected to incorporation by reference, or?
I don't think, I doubt
that.
I think incorporation by reference is one place where it will frequently arise.
Right.
But
okay.
I mean, the level of standard specification detail at the NRC, where I once worked, was just extraordinary. And that carelessness, not State Farm issues, but just insufficient knowledge of what's there, would have left in place something over here that no longer made sense in terms of what was done over there. It may be that computers have eliminated this problem through other kinds of uses of artificial intelligence.
Great. So Kathy, let me turn to you then. I see your hand is up to respond to this.
May I suggest inconsistency?
Yes, fine.
Yeah.
And that's actually very consistent. The report in a lot of the pilots primarily
are inconsistent, absolutely.
Yeah. Look
Perfect.
at redundancy, inconsistency, and cumulative burden, which I know this project wants to stay away from.
Yeah, okay. All right, so that's great. So thank you for that word tweak, Kathy. Is there anybody else who would like to be recognized with our review as we move through, giving people who weren't here last time a chance to weigh in before we get to the new material for today? Peter, I know you want to be called on. And Peter, did you say you want to be called on for number 6?
Yes.
Okay, great. Back to you, Jennifer.
Sorry, and I just had another suggestion. So this incorporated by reference, the standards, are you talking about like standards that have been incorporated by reference that are now obsolete or inaccurate? Like, I wonder if there's more we could say to clarify what we mean here by this recommendation specifically includes standards that have been incorporated by reference.
Comma, and may have been revised. Or abandoned.
Do we need the word
withdrawn, not abandoned.
Yeah. Do we need the word since in order to get at your meeting, Peter? And may since have been revised or abandoned, or do we not need that?
Yes, no, that's fine.
Okay.
Have been revised or withdrawn.
Okay. So while Kaja types withdrawn, I'll recognize Brian.
I don't think we need the comma before may.
Okay,
so
thanks for that. Brian?
Yeah, just the revised gives me a little pause, just, as I think Peter mentioned at the NRC, we do have lots of standards, and those standards I thought will exist at the same time, where different plants license at different times, are on different standards. So they have a revised standard. So being revised is not necessarily the trigger, because both standards could still be okay.
Well, this doesn't say that, I take it this doesn't say and eliminate, it just says review. And so if you review it, if it identifies, okay, for Duke power plant number 1, there's this standard, and there's a later version of the standard for Continental power plant number 3, the agency looking at that can say, well, okay, but you know, that was then and this is now, and there isn't a safety consideration that requires Duke to revise what it's doing.
Yeah, but I actually can't even make them revise what they're doing. They only update every 10 years. Is they once they're licensed on a standard, they stay on that standard for at least 10 years.
Oh well, that changed. That's something that's changed since I was there.
Kathy, do you have a response to this back and forth?
Yeah, I think maybe to make this all more simple and to incorporate what I think is a really good reminder is actually to just broaden when the statement says they should use tools to identify rules, we could say, comma, including standards incorporated by reference. Because we really, what the gist of the interviews were about how this whole process, because we want to look at standards, it's not saying they must do it, that are all these things that might be inconsistent, that might be outdated, redundant, etc.
That's fine.
Great. So then we don't need the last sentence.
Right.
Right. That's fine.
Great. Thanks for that.
Just with rules at the end, you might say with more recent rules and or standards, or, you know, just to include it.
Yeah.
There.
Okay.
And I'm fine with that.
Good.
Great. Okay. So I want to get to the new work for today, but I want to make sure that folks who weren't here last time have an opportunity to offer additional comments or suggestions on 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? Because Kaja, we ended at 6. I don't have it in front of me. Did we end at 6 last time?
I believe so. I will double check in.
Okay, great. So Peter, I understand that you want to be recognized on 6, but before I do that, let me just find out if anybody wants to be recognized. Anybody who wasn't here last time wants to be recognized with a suggestion on one of those earlier ones before 6. Okay, I don't see anybody. And so let me, Jennifer.
Sorry.
That's
I just have
okay.
a question, which is, there was a very important point made in the preamble about how this is like really focused on a more narrow retrospective review type thing than, you know, thinking about every rule that we might want to change. And I'm just wondering if that is going to be, is there some way to incorporate that into the recommendations? Or
so my understanding has been that that's what number 1 is doing. That number 1 is kind of cabining the universe of what we're talking about. Does that not address that?
I mean, I think particularly once you add like inconsistent with more recent rules, like inconsistency strikes me as something broader. And like, I see this all the time where agencies are acting inconsistently, that we see it in litigation all the time. And so that's what I'm worried about. Like, you know, typographic error, and also the word outdated, like could be read as something else. Like, I think like maybe, you know, rendered obsolete or something might sound different. Like to me, outdated could be like, you know, culture wars. We now have like, you know, rules that this is so outdated for our society that we banned whatever, you know, and now it's accepted, you know, I don't know.
Okay, so, no, I appreciate those. So with this language, the language that you're currently suggesting, is it addressing the concern that you have from the preamble's narrowing of scope?
I mean, I think, I guess I would suggest maybe this language at the end that we were just talking about maybe isn't needed if we include if we say rendered obsolete or redundant, or maybe there's another word that would be more narrow than just inconsistent.
Okay, Peter, is there anything that is not captured? You're the one who added the material inconsistent with more recent rules or standards at line 44 and 45. Is there anything that's now not captured by the 2 previous editions that requires us, in your mind, to keep that last suggestion?
I'm happy with what's on the screen.
Right. But I think what Jennifer is suggesting is that once we have included in line 42 standards incorporated by reference up there, and once we have revised in line 43 to suggest rendered obsolete or redundant. Isn't that what you were trying to get at with the addition of the word inconsistent? And so is there anything that is not captured by rendered obsolete or redundant that you're trying to get at? Because Jennifer's suggesting that still inconsistency might be raised as might appear to be more substantive than the narrow scope of this recommendation is trying to get to.
There can be conflicts. That isn't necessarily redundancy or obsolescence.
Okay, so I think I hear you saying you want to keep the last
Yeah.
set of language. Kathy, how about you? What is your reaction here?
Yeah, I think it's important. I also, just frankly, I mean, I'm obviously biased, but the language used in these pilots, used by almost all the agency people we talk to, is not rendered obsolete, but it is outdated. And, you know, the pilots, I'll point again on page 22, the GSA pilot that gets highlighted, you know, they talk about redundancy, inconsistency, and cumulative burden. And my understanding, at least, of the avoidance of controversial substantive issues with regard to retrospective review is to stay away from defining burden. So I understand that. To my mind, the preamble very narrowly, you know, in many times protests that it's not going anywhere near there. So inconsistency doesn't have to be a substantive or legal. There's lots of instances where the technology can flag, you know, as Peter put it, certain types of conflict, et cetera. So I would be in favor. If you write a recommendation that just says we're doing really mundane typographical error correction, you don't need any machine learning, AI augmented technology. So we'll look, I think, somewhat foolish.
Okay. All right. Jennifer, are you comfortable with that once we have this sort of background conversation, as well as the explanation of what's in the, not only the preamble, but against the backdrop of what the agency has reported to Kathy that's reflected in the report?
I'm a little bit hesitant about it. I'm trying to think if there is something that would sort of address my hesitation.
Okay, while you're thinking, let me call on Jeremy.
I mean, really what we're talking about here is things that are just facially inconsistent, right, Peter? So you're talking about, like, rule A says do X, don't do Y. Rule B says do Y, don't do X. And we're just trying to flag things like that. There's no sort of substantive value judgment necessarily as to this could be perceived as inconsistent. I mean, would just inserting something like facially inconsistent maybe?
Yeah, I
would it be? Oh, sorry.
It produces, I mean, what I'm concerned about is identifying rules on the books that generate conflict.
Right.
And they may or may not be outdated. And redundancy to me means, well, they say the same thing, so they're not going to be redundant.
But we mean like two rules that objectively cannot coexist because they require basically contradictory things.
Unless the agency review. I mean, this is looking for review. And the agency looking to go back to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission example, the agency looking at the review may say, well, but this power plant was licensed here and this power plant was licensed there. So, okay, the inconsistency doesn't trouble us.
Great. Kathy?
Yeah, just one other, you know, in the CMS pilot on page 34, they use language about resolving issues with, quote, intersecting or overlapping requirements across domain. Like, I do think.
Yeah, there you go.
One could argue that redundancy could be substantive too, my view. And so they're two different concepts, but it is a lot of what I think are sort of non-substantive, but beyond typographical error type work that we should be encouraging. I think agencies, all this is doing is asking agencies to kind of consider whether the tools could help them with these functional tasks. I don't know why we wouldn't want to do that.
And so I'd be happy with the language that Kathy just read.
So I think at this point, maybe Jennifer, I'll ask if this is language that you can live with. I'll see if there's anybody else who wants to weigh in one way or the other. And if you feel you can't live with it, then I think we have to take this language to a vote, and then we'll move on.
I have a suggestion that I think would maybe accommodate everyone's views that would make me more comfortable with this, which is you could say, leave the or in front of might benefit, say, or might benefit from elaboration or clarification, such as facially inconsistent rules or standards. Because I think the response would be, of course, a facially inconsistent rule or standard should be clarified or elaborated in some way. And so we're flagging.
I very much prefer the language that Kathy read from her report.
Well, that language, Peter, wasn't on the screen. So
I know it wasn't, and I'm inviting her to read it again.
Got it. So Kathy, could we do that? And
yeah,
then
so the language is on page 34 of the report, and it's about.
No, hold on just a second there. Are you saying that because you want, is Kaja going to open it, or are you just telling her? No, Kaja's not opening it. Okay, so we still need to
anyone who hasn't committed the report to memory.
Yes, thank you.
The language there is resolve issues with intersecting or overlapping requirements across domain. Personally, I don't know if you want that language or inconsistent rules or standards, which seems the same. I would personally remove facially. To me, that triggers facial attack versus. So I wouldn't include facially. I would go.
I would like might benefit from resolving issues with intersecting or overlapping rules or standards.
So intersecting. So basically, the idea is that what Peter and Kathy are putting on the table is changing the word inconsistent to intersecting or overlapping. I understand that what's on the screen now needs grammatical massaging, but Jennifer, how about that? Intersecting or overlapping instead of.
Yeah, I would be fine with that. I think that makes it
great. So let's try to let's give Kaja a minute to get the grammar right.
There you go.
Okay, great. And then we just have can you clean up the spelling of intersecting? Okay. So is there anybody else who wants to weigh in on one before we move on? Okay, thanks for that careful work. That was great. So I didn't hear anybody else who wanted to weigh in on something before 6. So that was Peter who wanted to offer a comment about 6. So if we could scroll there, Kaja. Okay, Peter, go ahead.
So 6 seems to me, well, maybe I'd say less hopeful than it could have been. It seems to me that what one is saying is not when the retrospective review serves as a basis, but more like when the analysis deriving from or coming from a respective review using an algorithmic tool will influence new rulemaking. Agencies should explain. And one of the ways will influence captures something which is not, I think, directly addressed in these recommendations, but maybe I missed it. One thinks that often the result of retrospective review will be to say, okay, let's eliminate that retrospective rule. But that won't always be the result of the analysis. So it takes a new rulemaking to eliminate the old rule, but serves as a basis for a new rulemaking. To me, doesn't capture the difference between, okay, let's get rid of it, and, well, instead, let's do this.
Great. Okay, thank you, Peter. Kathy, I see you nodding, but do you want to be recognized to respond?
Yeah, I like that.
Is there anybody else who'd like to be recognized on this change? Great. So I would like to Thank you then, everybody on 6. I would like to move on, but I don't like that we have these 2 floating questions on the right-hand side of the page. And so, Kaja, we scooted up to number 1 so quickly when Peter raised it that I just want to make sure that I know what they're for. So I think let's quickly talk about the first of the recommendations, number 5. Are there opportunities for explainability, interpretability here? My recollection is that at the very, very beginning of our conversation last time, we were looking for ways to talk about explainability and interpretability here, and we had a bunch of placeholders, and I feel like we just didn't remove this one. I think it is possible that I myself introduced 5 as a placeholder for where we could do this. And so maybe Kathy, I'd like to turn to you to see if this placeholder is still relevant or whether we can just delete it. And not delete number 5, keep number 5, but delete the floating comment.
Yeah, that one, that sounds right to me.
Yeah, okay. Does anybody else want to be recognized opposed to deleting this floating comment? Okay, so I think we can delete that floating comment.
Have we just violated the Freedom of Information Act?
How did we just violate the Freedom of Information Act?
By deleting the comment.
Pretty sure all these things remain buried in the anyway. Okay, so this is now. Can someone from the ACUS staff maybe comment on this? Jeremy, can I recognize you?
Sure. As you all know, lots of ACUS recommendations basically recommend that agencies develop and publish on their websites general policies for how they intend to do the subject of the recommendation. And this was merely a query to the committee as to whether the committee thinks it would be advisable for agencies to develop and make publicly available generally applicable policies governing how they acquire and intend to use algorithmic tools in retrospective review generally. That's all that is.
Okay, thanks for that. Can you just, one clarifying question, why is it attached to comment 5 as opposed to being, for example, at the beginning?
That I could not, I don't know that was purposeful.
Okay, all right. Kathy, do you have a reaction either on substance or location to this comment?
I wasn't sure what it was doing there, but you've covered that. And then I'd have to look. We have a specific recommendation about, don't we still, about
that was my recollection as well.
So like recommendation 2,
Kaja, can you go up there for a second?
I'm just not sure. I'm not. I suppose I could be persuaded. I'm not really sure exactly what it's. I mean, Jeremy, maybe you could say more. So the idea, right? This recommendation is going to recommend various agencies maybe pilot or experiment. So I'm not sure what this would mean. What that will you be asking them to do at that point?
You know, this might be redundant of what's already in 5, where we talk about general plans for retrospective review. And in that case, this might just be lingering from an earlier draft. Kaja, do you recall any?
Yeah, I think it's, so in our initial circulation of this, I think we had stuck this here because we talked about the policies that have to be published with like the learning agendas and the annual evaluation plans. And so we wanted to know whether or not there should be a specific policy on these types of tools and how they're used in addition to those.
Okay, thanks for that, Kaja. Peter?
Jumping ahead to numbers 8 and 9.
Well, hold on. No.
No. This is relevant here.
Is relevant to 8 and 9?
Absolutely relevant here.
All right.
Jumping ahead to numbers 8 and 9. I wonder if they don't solve this problem and shouldn't be numbered 1 and 2. That is to say, this is the general approach. Maybe some agencies are going to go it on their own if OMB and GSA don't help them. But the dominant thing ought to be and piloting strikes me as being particularly relevant to the large-scale developer of this stuff, if I can put it that way. Why have 37 agencies each involved in piloting? But one agency that is exploring options for using these tools and sharing its findings and capabilities with other agencies, they ought to be doing piloting. And an agency providing guidance on acquisition and use of such tools, they perhaps should be doing piloting.
Thanks for that, Peter. Without wordsmithing or even really commenting on the substance of 8 and 9, Kathy, do you want to look ahead to whether we can safely kind of move consideration of this to those recommendations?
It's a little hard to do that because I think we need to have a discussion.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my suggestion. Let us now, Kaja, can I ask you to move the comment from that is now attached to 5 down to 9, down to 8 and 9. Let's just deal with before we get there. We'll just go in order. Can you also please add a pin? I'll let you paste that. And can you also add an additional in that chain or some other chain to possibly move to 1 and 2 or move to 2 and 3 or whatever, move earlier is the question that I just don't want to lose Peter's suggestion from. Okay. All right. So Kathy, is this a new comment?
Yeah, sorry. So what about 6? I wanted to put to the committee for their thinking about this. I mentioned to Kazi and Jeremy, I'm not sure if I CC'd you, in the very new A4 circular that's been circulated for public comment on how agencies conduct cost-benefit analysis, there was there's only one mention of machine learning. There's a mention of machine augmented learning. And there's a comment that when results are generated by machine augmented learning, that reproducibility would require, now I'm quoting, transparency about the specific methods, design parameters, equations or algorithms, parameters, and assumptions used. So to my mind, something like that goes into 6. It would be great. If we could just cross-reference that, there should be a kind of parallel. If these technologies are being used ex ante in cost-benefit analysis, then when agencies go to potentially use them ex post in retrospective review, it would sort of be nice to cross-reference, I think, the A4 circular or some kind of language about transparency regarding the algorithms, parameters, and assumptions used. But it's just for consideration. I know you don't like footnotes, could be a footnote. I like the idea, though, that there should be a kind of, it's not just they should explain how the tool was used. They might need to think about what kind of disclosure is necessary to do that.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Jeremy, let me call on you before I call on Peter.
Only a procedural point. That's a draft revision to A4 that's out for public comment and has not been adopted yet. Do you want to use language in a non-final version of circular A4? That's the only concern I'd have.
Yeah, no, I recognize that.
Is there a way, Kathy, though, to capture without cross-referencing, which strikes me as a complicated idea for the reasons Jeremy just said, is there a way to capture the list of verbs that you like that would just stand on their own as a helpful list of verbs? And if so, where would you want them? Are you talking about a second sentence? It seems to me like you're sort of expanding on what it means to contribute to the decision, but.
Yeah, and I guess I was hearkening back. We delete lots of last time's committee discussion got a little bit into
right,
what would be required. And I was struck by that, because sort of encouraging, transparency about specific methods, design parameters. I liked that, but we don't.
So I want to call on Peter, but I want to get your comment in words on the screen before I call on Peter. So Kathy, can you say the language that is appealing to you in a way that Kaja can type it out? And then Peter, I'll recognize you for still working on 6?
So it's
I can try language too.
transparency. Should I put it in the chat and then you can cut and paste from there? Is that easier than reading it aloud? Why don't I just...
Sure. Although in general, we're staying away from substantive comments in the chat. I think for cut and paste purposes of lengthy text, it is a fine use of chat.
This may or may not do it. Agencies should be transparent about their processes, comma, explaining.
Okay, so that is one higher level of generality up, Kathy, than the specificity of what you mean by transparency.
Yeah, that's fine.
Are you okay with Peter? Yeah. Okay.
I just thought it would be interesting for this committee just to be able to think about the parallels between.
Great. Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for that, both of you. Does anybody else want to comment on the language of that we're working on in number 6? Okay, or on any other aspects of number 6 before we move on? Okay, so Peter, is your hand still up or newly up?
Oh no, sorry.
Still up. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. So I am ready to move to number 7. This is an exciting moment, people. Are you with me? I think at 49 minutes in, we are going to tackle the next new thing. So let's do that. So we're at line 75. Agencies should also develop their own internal evaluation and oversight mechanisms for algorithmic tools used in retrospective review, both for initial approval of a tool and for regular oversight of the tool. Agency considerations should include risk management and regular monitoring responsibilities. All right, the floor is open and I would love to see hands or a note in the chat that you'd like to be recognized. Peter, I see your hand.
The language is terrific. I'm just going to suggest changing the number to 9 and changing number 8 to 7 and number 9 to 8.
Can we, okay. All right.
Because it's, should also develop their own internal evaluation and oversight mechanisms really follows the advice that there should be some generality in this matter.
Right. Okay. So let's tackle the order separately.
Okay.
But thank you for raising them. I just want to make sure we're in agreement on substance.
Substance is fine.
Okay. So thanks for that, Peter. Are there any other comments on the substance of 7? Jennifer.
I wonder if we should include words like as applicable right before for regular oversight of the tool, because I could imagine circumstances where they run like a single like algorithmic tool, like, and then they're done, and like regular oversight to me like wouldn't make sense during like a single run. So I would just say something like as applicable for regular oversight if they're like using it.
That makes perfect sense to me, but it also triggers some vague recollection that ACUS doesn't like as applicable on the, no, I have some memory of debates that like everything is as applicable, so we shouldn't need to say it all the time. Was that just a different committee I was on that just?
I don't know that ACUS has an institutional stance, but yes, that is exactly the kind of thing that always fosters about 30 minutes of debate on the plenary.
Yes, no, I feel like I have participated in many rounds of 30 minutes of a debate about as applicable.
What I would say is,
but I hear what Jennifer's saying. Say again, Jeremy.
I would say use it purposefully. If you think it really is useful there, use it, but don't just throw it in because otherwise someone will say everything is as applicable. Right,
and I feel like this is also the kind of thing that will get stricken on the floor with somebody who has participated lovingly for many decades in the as applicable debate. But that having been said, Jennifer, I hear what you're saying and think it is additive. Is there anybody else who wants to weigh in either on yes, keeping it, or no, on the principle of the everything is as applicable that I just asked about? Okay, so it seems to me that we have at least a silent consensus to keep as applicable for regular oversight.
If the order is changed, and I continue to think it should be, then the word should could be changed to may.
All right.
Because I don't think we want to say to every agency in the government, you got to do this on your own.
Right. Can you flag, Kaja, can you do a like a should/may, depending on, or may consider or should consider or something like that, that we can circle back to that. And then I think it might be time to actually move the things around. Although actually before moving things around, at least in my head, it's making sense that maybe we need to deal with the content of the OMB and GSA thing and then think about where they belong in order. So let's try that. If we find it doesn't work because everything is interdependent on order, then we can change that. But maybe, I think I hear that people are okay with 7. Obviously we need to circle back to it given the placement questions, but I'd like to maybe move to 8 and think about the OMB language and next, unless I am looking to see a hand, I don't see anybody who wants to be recognized on 7 still. So I'm gonna move us to 8. So I'd like to recognize anybody who wishes to talk on 8 about OMB. So Peter, it sounded like you had a view on this being a generally good thing. So did you want to say anything about the language or about why it's a generally good thing?
No, I mean I'm happy with I'm happy with the language of both 8 and 9. It just strikes me as I guess I've said several times, as in a government with many agencies with varying budgets and levels of expertise, this is the first move, or it at least is the move before you call on agencies to think about developing their own internally.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Jennifer?
So is the idea here, and I'm sorry if any of this was discussed because I wasn't here at the first meeting, is the idea that these two should be parallel processes, or is the idea that maybe GSA should look first to see whether they can acquire algorithmic tools that could be used or licensed across the government, and then OMB or provide guidance for like other tools? Or is OMB's guidance supposed to apply to GSA as they're trying to, acquire algorithmic tools?
Kathy, do you want to speak to that substantive question?
Yes, I'm sighing because I don't want to rain on the parade, but so I wanted to hear more debate. So I had 2 reactions to this. So, we tried, but OMB didn't want to talk to us. So it wasn't a priority. And we did 48-hour-long Zoom interviews with a lot of agencies, and there's a lot, in my opinion, of heft support in the report. But a recommendation like this, we can get into talking about the merits of it. I can imagine on the floor of ACUS being in the hot seat asking about the support, for this recommendation. So
from OMB, you mean?
Yeah. So I'm not.
Kathy?
Yes.
Was the reluctance you encountered before or after your colleague got sent to Washington?
Yeah. Now I'm sure Ricky Revesz would put this on the top of his pile. No, listen, I believe it's, I don't know, maybe Jeremy, Kaja have more insider ACUS, information about that. But so I'm reticent on that ground. Number 2, I've been around ACUS a long time and talked to various people. In a prior recommendation, I made a recommendation about getting OIRA, OMB involved, and that was after I'd actually interviewed folks there. So this idea that a 45-person body with a lot on its table right now, just responding to a new executive order and a new 90+ page draft A4 circular, et cetera, I'm not sure that this would rise to the top of the priorities. So that's my, I'm reticent.
Let me ask you, also having seen OMB at some of these things before too, I mean, their representative may comment on the floor, right? And may ask to change things on the floor, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it would get either stricken, or it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad idea that we shouldn't include.
Absolutely.
If we think it's a good idea that we should include, I think I'd be prepared to defend it on the merits, whether they decide that it rises to the top of their pile in terms of the order in which they're going to address it somewhere between now and never, doesn't mean that we shouldn't necessarily make it.
I agree. That's why I was sort of
Okay.
in the background, hoping the committee
Okay.
would
Yeah.
discuss the merits of this, because
Sure.
unlike many of the other recommendations where I can point to support
Right.
from this body of work in the report, this one is not that.
Okay. All right. So I'm looking for Jennifer.
So just to back to my question. So in the ideal world, in your ideal world, assuming OMB like wants to be cooperative, is it best for GSA to be the first mover in exploring some options for acquiring algorithmic tools, and then OMB do guidance about other acquisitions after we've sort of figured out what GSA can do for the government? Or is your idea that maybe OMB should be the first mover on like providing the guidance on acquisition, and then GSA can like figure out licensing? Because I guess in my mind, the GSA piece actually makes sense to go first, both for resources and also like, I think like licensing, it would make sense if they could acquire something and license it to agencies. That would be much easier and simpler. And so I guess my suggestion, I agree with Peter about moving the things up, but I think I would try to make the GSA one more clearly like our first mover if we could with the language.
And is there I see head nods and thumbs up, so that's good, Jennifer. Is there language that you could suggest that would make it more first moverish?
Well, so I think you put it
Number
first.
7.
Yeah, you make it number 7.
Okay.
And I might include acquisition in the GSA thing, or like to explore options for acquiring.
Using, yes.
Did you want to use the word licensing, or is that enough embedded in acquiring?
I don't know. Kathy's shaking no, so I think just acquiring is probably right. But like, and then say, I wonder if like we could say sort of like, I mean, maybe we even say like, and like report their findings to OMB, and then you say OMB should provide guidance or something, or like, in consultation with GSA. I'm not sure. Peter sounds like looks as like he has.
Sure, I'll recognize Peter.
You could add the word developing before acquiring.
Okay, so for developing, acquiring, and using. And then I think Jennifer was just saying share its findings and capabilities with OMB and other agencies. Kathy, what is that equivocal?
I like the way this is going. I would keep OMB out of number 7, right? Like just have them stand alone. So 7 is about GSA. I don't think, although I understand GSA,
right.
And then Peter, I think, was going to weigh in on some, I don't know, Peter, were you going to weigh in on how to frame what OMB should do, or you're happy with that?
No, I'm happy with that.
Can I ask a substantive question that I am not totally sure I understand? What is OMB's role here on the acquisition? Is this because of the FAR, or like why is acquisition in OMB and not in GSA? Is it because of the procurement rules? I am a little bit confused about OMB's role in the acquisition here, given what we were just saying about GSA.
I think taking the acquisition and out wouldn't be bad. Use actually would also include acquisition in some sense.
All right. I mean, mine was an honest, substantive question, not necessarily a suggestion born out of uncertainty about. And I do think I think OMB is responsible. Is this right? If memory serves, for the FAR, or it's GSA is not responsible. Dave, I'm going to recognize you. It looks like you want to weigh in on this comment.
Yeah. So, OMB does not issue the FAR. The FAR is managed in a GSA directorate.
Yeah, okay. That's
a joint effort between them, DoD, and NASA. There is also within GSA an office that is working on sort of the technology of regulatory development. The leader of that group, I think Virginia Huth is still in that group. OMB's procurement responsibilities are very broad through the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, but it would seem that the questions of acquisition here are better placed with GSA.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So I think that supports the crossing out of acquisition and in line 78, and then we would just have GSA doing the tasks that we've now identified in 7 and OMB doing the tasks that we're now talking about in number 8. I'd love to hear some comments on the substance on these 2 recommendations as they currently stand now that we've moved them. Jennifer, I see your hand up. I'm not sure it's a new hand or an old hand.
Old hand.
Okay, great. Is there anybody else who wants to weigh in on any substance here now that we've moved, now that we've both been refining, but also have moved 7 and 8? Okay, I'm scrolling through and I don't see anybody who looks like they're trying to reach a button. So I think let's leave 7 and 8 then and go back now to what is now 9. And let's work on the consider or may or should or whatever it is that we wanted to do with those verbs now that we have moved it. And so whatever agencies are doing is following the suggestion to GSA and OMB. So I'll recognize Peter first.
I toyed, that's the right verb, with the idea of suggesting that there should be some equivalent to chief information officers, a council that gets set up for this. No, but it might be useful to add to this now 9. Agencies should share their experiences in using these tools.
Well, okay, it's a separate sentence. Hold on, right? You're not.
No, I'm starting at the top.
Okay,
Agencies
starting at the top. Okay.
Share their experiences in using these tools, because we've now talked about somebody else developing them, and may also develop their own internal evaluation and oversight mechanisms.
I feel ambivalent about the word may here, honestly, because
or consider developing is also fun.
So don't we want to say and should consider? Isn't should consider what you're trying to capture?
I know it's not. I don't think that they should, but I think that they might. Again, I have in mind that there are many agencies of different size. And so what we're doing is, for some of them, this will be important.
Right. No, I understand that, but isn't that captured in should consider? I guess I'm
consider developing. Well, no.
Yeah. Okay. The reason I'm a little bit uncertain about may or might is that I'm not sure they may always do that. So do we want them to or not, and under what circumstances, right?
But we could leave out should also. Agencies should share their experiences and
consider developing. Yeah. Great. Okay. Are there any other thoughts on the language on the screen? I think we still have the language floating out on the right-hand comment that I asked to move down here. But I think maybe now we have this comment is now resolved by what we've done, which I think, Peter, was your initial comment to begin with.
Right.
So I think we can resolve these comments. And it's the next comment as well, Kaja. Great. Okay, so is there anything else on 7, 8, or 9 that anybody would like to comment on now that we've been addressing them as a cohort? Okay, seeing none, let's move to what is now number 10. And Kaja, is this the last one? Can you just get us to, okay. Great. So agencies should consider piloting new algorithmic tools to test and measure their effectiveness for purposes of retrospective review. Peter?
Well, again, I don't know why this is agencies and not Gen GSA, or if it is agencies. If agencies develop new algorithmic tools, they should consider testing and measuring their effectiveness. But I don't know why this is a mandate or a recommendation to every agency in the government rather than to the folks who are centrally located.
Kathy, do you have a reaction to that?
It's a good point. I want to just give by way of very short background. So GSA is involved in one of the main pilots in the report. There are others, so DOD, HHS, there are first mover agencies, and who are doing this, piloting it, have internal AI chief officers. They have, informal groups across agencies to discuss these things. Peter's absolutely right that there's sort of heterogeneity on this, but the one substantive point to put on the table is there are some mixed views as to whether the GSA centralized approach is the best or a kind of first mover by an agency like HHS, DOD, et cetera. So I think that we should preserve, I agree with you, Peter, we don't want to kind of tell agencies that they all should be doing this, but I think the spirit behind this, and I like now that it's following kind of the more centralized GSA, OMB, is some kind of encouragement. Some of the agencies like CMS have partnered with GSA. It's sort of like encouraging a spirit of experimentation, et cetera. But I agree.
Oh, how about moving the should and dropping the consider? Agencies piloting new algorithmic tools should test and measure their effectiveness for purposes of retrospective review.
Kathy, what do you think about that?
I have no problem with it now that I'm just thinking aloud. Isn't that a little bit redundant of what we've said above?
So that was my question. I don't fully understand what 10 is doing as a standalone, and certainly not at the end.
Yeah.
The order of time, doesn't it come before what we just said agencies should do?
So that in this guise, I had understood it as more of a kind of encouragement, nudging, of agencies to go forward and experiment or pilot along the lines that there are several examples in the report, not this idea that they should test and measure. I think that's incorporated above when I don't know what number it is.
So let me invite some other views from other folks in the room. I think the question is really about the heterogeneity issue about whether we're pushing, recommending, or whether we're not, with the understanding that there are many agencies that aren't really in a position to do this and won't do this. So I wonder if there are folks, especially from agencies, who would like to weigh in on this. I mean, especially from agencies, but doesn't mean that other people who are not from agencies, I am not welcoming them. I would love to hear some other voices as well. Okay.
Maybe this belongs in 2.
I see Peter's hand.
Maybe this belongs in 2, at the end of 2.
Say that again, Peter.
Well, 2 is all about agencies contemplating using a tool to support retrospective review, and now how should we think about doing it, and then making this determination, assess, so forth and so on. If there's no such tool, consider whether they have sufficient in-house expertise and capacity to develop an adequate tool, and then
this sentence,
and then this idea.
Okay, Kathy, what do you think about that? If we move that, what is now 10 to the end of 2? I know you still have some concerns about the way the verbs are ordered or are prioritized. And I'm wondering whether the placement means anything to you.
Yeah, I guess I'm having that, like, so it seems a strange place to put that point. I thought we have another, we have something about how they should do ongoing monitoring, et cetera. That seems to get at the idea of measuring effectiveness. So it may just be extraneous. I'm not sure that we need it. As I said, I had understood, not arguing to keep it there, that number 10 and how it was framed was more a kind of encouraging agencies, maybe as applicable, to experiment with these technologies.
So
the idea that they should test and measure. I think we have something, don't we?
So you're saying test and measure is already captured by, Kasia, can you scroll down again, please? Is already captured by the internal oversight that we just talked about in 9. Is there anything that's being captured by test and measure that's not already being captured by 9?
Right, that was my point. I think the test.
Yeah. Peter, do you have a reaction?
I don't mind dropping 10 entirely.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing that does occur to me, but it hasn't come up in the conversation, is that maybe 10 was intended to say anytime you develop a new algorithmic tool, you should pilot it as a retrospective review algorithmic tool. I don't know that that makes a whole lot of sense, but actually that's the way in which its current wording suggests it would be understood.
I don't really want to cold call, but I know that we had people from agencies commenting before. And so Dave or Jennifer, I think maybe from an agency. I don't know if either of you wants to weigh in, or anybody wants to weigh in on the back and forth that we're having now. My sense is that the current way we're leaning is to just cut it entirely. Yeah, so I think if anybody wants to propose that we keep it, now would be a good time to hear from you. Jennifer?
I'm in favor of cutting it and this sort of back and forth.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, so we'll cut that 10. So then the recommendations will now end with the trio of GSA, OMB agencies sharing and monitoring. And I think that wraps up our consideration of the recommendations. So I'm going to just give a moment to see if there is anybody else who would like to weigh in on any aspect of the 7, 8, 9 trio. And then I think we'll take a break, and then I think we'll come back and we'll tackle the preamble. But I'm going to give a moment now to just see if anybody would like to comment on any aspect of the 7, 8, 9 division of labor and suggestion. I'm scrolling through to see if I can identify people trying to comment. Okay, I don't see anybody trying to comment. So I think we can enthusiastically say we have worked our way through the recommendations. And I think, Jeremy, can you just remind me what we do for a break? We say like a 5-minute break or something like that? Is it totally my call?
It is your call.
Okay, well then I call, let's take a 5-minute break. And so we'll come back around a little after 3:20, and we'll start with the preamble then. So thanks so much, everybody, for your good work in this first half, and we'll see you soon. Bye. 5 minutes, everybody. Welcome back. I think I'm going to
wait for Catherine
till Kathy gets her screen back on. Exactly. Thanks, Peter. There she is. Hi, Kathy.
Hi.
So welcome back, everybody. Screen on or screen off. It's good to have everybody back. So let's tackle the preamble. And I think now that we've done the recommendations, maybe we really should start with the title, which is this question from the ACUS staff about, Jeremy, can you set this up for us? I know we talked about it briefly at the beginning of the last meeting, but then we decided to table it until we came back and worked through the recommendations. So why don't you introduce this if you would?
Sure. The basic idea is that not all tools here are necessarily classified as artificial intelligence, and indeed, simpler solutions might actually be effective in certain circumstances. Kathy perhaps can speak more to it, but I know she also changed the name of her report to algorithmic tools. It seemed like a better fit for what this recommendation is doing.
Great. So Kathy, I know you just went off camera. I don't know if you are available to weigh in on this title change. Okay, I think maybe let's circle back then, because there she is.
I got an emergency person here, but I got rid of them. I did hear that. Yes, I'm good for similar reasons. My report was once called, I think, Artificial Intelligence in Retrospective Review, and it's now, as submitted to the committee, titled something very similar, titled Artificial Intelligence, whoops, where is it? Algorithmic Retrospective Review of Agency Rules. So I'm fine with that.
So I think we have two suggestions from the ACUS staff on the title. So one would be consistent with what you just read, Kathy, Algorithmic Retrospective Review of Agency Rules, or Algorithmic Tools in Retrospective Review of Agency Rules. And Peter, I see that you have a hand up and I recognize you.
I prefer having tools because really that's mostly what these recommendations are about. So algorithmic tools and retrospective review of agency rules.
Great. Is there any objection to that? Okay. So seeing no objection, I think let us resolve that comment and move on to the substance of the preamble. So why don't we start with the first paragraph? And I'm not going to read it out loud, but I'm going to give a minute for folks to read the first paragraph, so lines 1 through 9, and see if there are suggestions that people would like to make. Okay, any comments? Peter, I recognize you.
I guess this is on line 7. The conferences also recognize, however, that agencies often have limited resources available to conduct retrospective reviews, and that the need for retrospective review frequently arises in the context of standards that have been incorporated by reference.
Kathy, let me turn to you for an initial response based on the report or your views.
I'm happy. I'm just like, this is coming up. This is really, I think, to Jeremy and Kaja, right? This is sort of a comment about the conference and prior work of the conference, right? Isn't that, it's like prior recommendations, prior work.
If a footnote was needed, there could be a footnote to the recommendations, the reports and recommendations.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks, Kathy. I should have called on Kaja and Jeremy to begin with. Can I ask though, well, so maybe I will see if Kaja and Jeremy want to speak, but I also just want to wonder whether would your comments that you just added, Peter, be taken care of just with a citation in the footnote to those standards incorporated by reference?
Can I say so? What about just in line 1, again, just to keep things simple, retrospective review is the process by which agencies assess existing rules, including whatever we said down in the recommendation, like including
standards that have been incorporated by reference.
Yeah. Isn't that how we handled it in down below? I kind of like that.
Thanks for going there, Kaja. I was just going to ask you to do that.
No.
Yeah. So that's how we've done it. Okay, so let's go back up to the, yeah, Peter, does that sound okay to you? Okay. Do we need to cite then? Do we need to cite to any of the previous work on standards incorporated by reference, the ACUS work? Jeremy, do you have a view on that? I saw you a look crossed your face.
only because, I mean, this is up to the committee. I mean, as I read it, that almost seems like it reads like it converts this into a retrospective review of rules incorporated by reference. But I mean, would there be an opportunity, say, with footnote 1, where we actually just list all of the recommendations that have addressed retrospective review to cite 2011-5, which talks about periodically reviewing rules that incorporate standards by reference? I mean, we could also put a parenthetical there if that's helpful.
So that was my initial suggestion, that we just do it that way for sort of similar reasons that you flagged. But then when Kathy pointed out that that is how we handled it below, the parallelism sort of appeals to me. So I wonder if other people have a view on this.
Is 2011-5 just reviewing standards, or is it the recommendation, the general recommendation on changing how incorporations by reference occurs? Because it's the latter report, Emily Bremer's report, and for that matter, all the discussion that went on at that time that makes clear just how large a problem this has been.
Yeah, the recommendation itself has a section called Updating Incorporations by Reference. It has a specific recommendation that agencies should periodically review regulations and make amendments to ensure that complete and accurate information is included, notified of all change. I haven't read this carefully, but
so how about this? How about if we move the parenthetical including standards that have been incorporated by reference to the next sentence? Because then that is where we're really talking about what the administrative conference has previously done, rather than defining retrospective review. And then that makes the cites to the provision that Jeremy was just reading even more meaningful. I think that handles, Peter, your concern without unduly weighting the idea that retrospective review is, that's like tackling Kathy's
That's fine.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody else? Or does anybody want to weigh in on any other aspect of the first paragraph? All right, I don't see any requests to do so. So Kaja, can you, oh, I see you're typing. Could I ask you to scroll down when you are prepared to, so that we have paragraph? Is it possible to get both of them on the screen or not? No, we can't really get both of them on the screen. Okay, so let's just take a minute and yeah. Thanks, Kaja. Okay, so I'm asking everybody now to read this second paragraph from lines 11 to 18, and we'll be quiet for a minute, and then I'll call on people who wish to be recognized about changing or commenting. Okay, I'm now looking for hands. I see Peter's hand, and I'll start with him, and I welcome other hands after that.
So it seems to me that the last sentence should not be indifferent to the central role of a GSA. So I would suggest starting it with the General Services Administration and several other agencies.
Kathy, what do you think?
And just to be clear, the reason for that is in part, now then we go on to talk about in the following paragraph about, well, I might do this, but then there's that. And the last sentence of the next paragraph can again be modified to refer to the GSA effort.
Okay, so we'll talk about the next paragraph in a minute, but let's just see if there's anybody else who wants to comment on this particular suggestion for GSA. Kathy, I see you nodding, so it seems like you're
fine.
You're fine with this. Okay, is there anybody else who wants to weigh in on this GSA point or any other aspect of this paragraph? Including the definition of tools or anything like that? Jennifer?
So is GSA actually experimenting with the use of tools for retrospective review, or are they exploring them?
So that's why so I looked at the language sort of carefully and thought about the pilot. So the way this is written, experimenting the use of tools to conduct some tasks in service of retrospective review or similar functions. So the GSA CMS pilot has this cross-domain analysis that would be in service of retrospective review. So that seems okay.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
But was your point, you mean you would use
Exploring rather than experimenting.
Yeah, I've already begun exploring the use of algorithmic tools to conduct some tasks.
That's fine. I mean, I have no problem with that. I was just answering your substantive. I thought you were asking a substantive, question.
Kathy, can I just double check that I am following this? Because I thought you wouldn't want to to move from experiment to explore, because I thought the way I read your report, it is more exploring sounds more passive to me than experimenting.
Yeah. So maybe you could use piloting. Experimenting maybe is better. Yeah.
Experimenting.
I thought I was kind of answering a substantive question of whether their particular pilot relates to retrospective review. I'm not.
I see. Okay. Jennifer,
if we defer to you on that.
if we keep it, Jennifer, if we keep it as experimenting, does that, with the background that Kathy said, does that satisfy the question you raised?
Yeah, it was just a substantive question. If it's substantively correct that they're experimenting, then I'm fine.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Okay. James, I'm going to recognize you now to talk about the paragraph that we're currently working on, lines 11 through 19.
Yeah. And this is a function of knowing perhaps too much about AI. So lines 14 and 15, you define an algorithmic tool as a computerized process that uses a series of rules. So in AI, there's a technical distinction between algorithms that use rules and those that use statistical inferences drawn from data. Okay, so ChatGPT is really not a rules-driven tool, but it is algorithmic and artificial intelligence. And I don't object at all to footnote 3, where you define it widely enough to include artificial intelligence, right? But I would just say rules or inferences drawn from data.
And
or mathematical inferences might be helpful, and that might, and that would do it. In terms
James, can I just make sure that I understand? So the mathematical inferences drawn from data, you're saying, are also used to transform specified inputs into outcomes. So you're fine with
right. That's the whole point. It's like, okay, what you're saying is, all I'm saying is that there's a distinction among people who know computer science, that some are rules driven, but then there are other tools that simply say these words are close enough to those words, and that drives the outcome.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay, Kathy, that's all.
Do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, that's fine. I probably, just because this is ACUS and lawyers, I probably would keep out mathematical. I think people who understand computer science know inferences from data. Right. So but I'm with, I would just take out mathematical.
Okay. So if we delete the word mathematical, James, you don't object to okay. Okay, that's great. So are we ready to move to the next paragraph? Seeing no objection, let's do that. So the next paragraph is lines 20 through 30. And actually, Kaja, can you go down just a tiny bit more so that we can get the footnotes, if that's possible? it might not be possible to get all to footnote 7. That's okay. So let us have the text then. Yeah, thank you. Peter, I'll call on you in a minute, but let me just give people a chance to read the paragraph. Okay, so I'm gonna look for hands now for folks who wish to speak on this paragraph, and I saw Peter's hand, so I'll start with him.
So it's the last sentence. I would eliminate the words agencies must also consider practical challenges, including, and start with the potentially high startup costs associated with developing or procuring algorithmic tools, development of internal capacity, expertise, staffing and training needs, and ongoing maintenance and oversight, and then how to continue your choice in effect may lead agencies to rely on the development work of GSA and other agencies, or make the work of GSA in developing such tools particularly important. I think, again, it's something I've said in a variety of contexts. The importance, this recommendation ought really to emphasize the importance of central development, because there are many agencies that would just be paralyzed to do this.
Kathy, can I call on you to respond?
Yeah, that seems fine.
Okay, is there anybody else who wants to weigh in on this or some other aspect of this paragraph?
Think development work.
Do we mean, what is the work you're trying to capture there, Peter?
Oh, I was trying, no, development, not developing.
And what are you trying to capture by moving from developing to development?
The GSA is at work developing approaches.
I am stumbling over it slightly because development work sounds more.
Okay, just take out the word. On the work of GSA and other agencies.
GSA, yeah. But then I think we might need some qualifier of other agencies, the work of GSA and other agencies in.
Well, but then I think it's clear what it is they're going to rely on. You prefer may lead agencies to build on the work of GSA and other agencies.
No, it's not rely that I'm concerned about. I feel like work of GSA and other agencies is just sort of vague.
So maybe it's to rely on, may lead agencies to rely on the AI tools developed or used. I'm just trying to look at the language prior in the paragraph, but something.
Yeah.
It's to rely on the algorithmic tools developed by GSA and other agencies.
Fine.
Yeah,
that would do it.
Yeah, I think that's closer to what I was wondering about. Okay. Does the first reference to agencies in line 30 need some other qualification, like agencies who are not yet involved, or agencies considering being involved, or agencies not yet using? Is there some qualification, Kathy, that you think would be appropriate there?
I don't think so. I like the kind of open nature.
Okay. Okay, so is there any other comment that anybody wants to make on this paragraph? Great, let's move on to the next paragraph. Could you just scroll down, Kaja, for the last sentence or two, or the last line or two? Okay, thanks. So I'm looking for hands on comments on this provision. So Kathy, do you want to start?
Yeah, the first is just to add whatever we came up with for inconsistency. I can't see it when we, that should go in.
Right, Kaja, could you go down? I think it was in recommendation 1.
It's recommendation 1, and maybe the thing to do is just leave to the Committee on Style to revise the first sentence of this recommendation to mirror what's in what's now.
That sounds good. So Kaja, if you want to just cut and paste it and drop a note or do whatever it is that you were about to do. I didn't want to micromanage you there, but just dropping a note that has to be.
Down there, did we land on changing outdated to obsolete? I thought we didn't. In number 1? Maybe we did.
No, I think you were, I think that was, we did land on it and we decided to keep, I thought we continued. I thought your comment that we ought to stay with outdated prevailed, but maybe.
I thought so too, but I'm just seeing it there on the screen.
Right.
So I had remembered that we had landed on this, but I don't have a strong feeling. And I remember this was something that Jennifer was really involved in. Jennifer, did you, I think you had a view.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer rendered obsolete, but I don't know that we actually came to ground on it. I think we just were talking about the latter half, and so probably didn't.
What do you prefer about rendered obsolete as compared to outdated?
I think outdated can capture a lot of things that are more controversial. Some things are truly rendered obsolete, like you have a standard about a military vehicle that is no longer used versus outdated. Well, what does that that strikes me as a lot more malleable. And so I was focused on trying to, narrow it based on what I understood.
Right. That was my memory, which is why I also remembered, I thought that we had settled on this text that's in red line on the screen. Peter?
That's why outdated is particularly important in the context, at least, of incorporation by reference, because outdated is not necessarily rendered obsolete. It's just, well, this standard has been revised. It's still quite relevant, but it's been changed in important ways, not necessarily redundant. I myself would prefer outdated. It would be exciting to have a vote.
Or could I suggest the language that's used by HHS in the regulatory cleanup rule is outmoded?
Outmoded is fine.
Jennifer, do you have a view on outmoded?
I mean, I think outmoded is probably better than outdated. I think I was thinking that the might benefit from resolving issues with intersecting or overlapping rules or standards would capture it, but I understand that perhaps there are some that are just outmoded that are not involving intersecting or overlapping. So
I think if you rendered obsolete, this is a substitute for rendered.
Yeah, but so okay, now Peter, your last question leads me to ask, are you suggesting that we need both outmoded and rendered obsolete?
No. Precisely the opposite. If Jennifer isn't satisfied with outmoded and others of us aren't satisfied with rendered obsolete, wouldn't this be exciting? It would be an opportunity actually to vote on an amendment.
Yeah, no, I heard you, and we might be moving to that. But I was just not sure who was saying what at this point. So Jennifer, can you? I'm so sorry. Maybe it's maybe my listening ears are not tight enough at this time of day. But can you just say one more time? Are you suggesting that you are happy, or at least can live with outmoded, or not? You still want rendered obsolete?
I can live with outmoded.
Okay. So then I think I was just trying to figure out if we were to vote. I just wanted to figure out what the option.
Not to deprive Peter of his exciting vote.
No, I know. I feel like, what else are we going to do, right? I'm now feeling a little guilty that we have not provided enough excitement.
We got to have one vote shortly. In fact,
All right.
If we've adopted the suggestion, which is that the Committee on Style will make the first sentence of this paragraph correspond to what's in recommendation 1, I move for the adoption of the recommendation.
Okay, I think we're not quite up to that because I think we want to. Oh, it already, yeah, okay, it moved there. But let's just let Kaja. Thank you, Kaja, for getting the view. So that's what I was wondering if we could do. So thank you for finding out the way to do it.
Thank you. I just learned how to do this.
Yeah, that's great. This was an important Zoom skill, so wonderful. Can you just, do you have that comment, the bubble for the Committee on Style that we have to match? I just want to match to the right sentence because the Committee on Style memories will fade, people. I just want to let you, since we all just couldn't remember what we agreed on for number 1, which was a mere hour ago, I wanted to just make sure that we...
That first sentence should be mirror, in effect, what's now recommendation 1.
Got it. Thank you.
Not mirror in recommendation 1. Mirror, mirror language, sorry.
Yeah,
no,
that's right.
Fine. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm almost ready to move to a vote, but before we do that, I do just want to see if anybody else wants to say anything about this last paragraph of the preamble, or indeed say something more about this first sentence, although I think we've maybe resolved it. But is there anything else about the first paragraph that anybody wants to weigh in on? Jennifer.
I'm just wondering about the language for which the potential risks and benefits are still unclear, whether it should make more of a nod to some of the legal issues implicated in that we mentioned in the previous paragraph. Because to me, like, if you're doing more complex tasks, that could potentially infringe on agency decision-making in a way that like could bring up some of the issues we flagged. And so I wonder if there's a way to broaden this, like to say something, I'm trying to think what like a good text, for which may raise additional issues, or which, or something.
So are you suggesting getting rid of the potential risks and benefits in?
No, I just think maybe flagging also something about how, like, I think that there's much more of a concern with like agency decision making when you're having AI do more complex tasks than
so it's
review.
not just risks and benefits, but yeah. Okay.
Fine.
Kathy, are you weighing in on this point, or you have a different point to raise? Okay, so let's just resolve this suggestion.
I will say that, I just wanted to add, like the sentence that follows it seems like it's capturing part of it, but I wonder, so it may need to be modified, but the next sentence seems to be recognizing important concerns regarding agencies' use of such tools for anything, right? So I think that's what, I guess I was just trying to flag that those may have additional issues. So I don't know if it reads kind of redundant, but.
I think we could strike that sentence, and I don't know what that sentence is doing, at the same time. Like there's a whole paragraph. There's a lot. I know ACUS likes to hedge and be conservative, but there's a whole paragraph about potential concerns. So
yeah, that makes sense to me, and including those highlighted above.
Okay, is there anybody else who wants to weigh in on this sentence as it currently reads? Or the striking of the other sentence? Okay, and Jennifer, you're comfortable with this now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I want to call on Kathy, but before I do, I'm sorry, for a Committee on Style note, Kaja, can you just flag that the second dash is of a different length than the first dash, and so we should fix that. Thank you. Kathy.
Only if we take a vote now.
Right, I know. I object.
The last sentence. So the last sentence seems to have narrowed, maybe unduly. So I think there used to be design and use.
Oh, right. You mentioned this before the
I
meeting.
also think there's best practices that are captured in our recommendations, sort of about what's the number now, that, you know, sort of about procurement, sort of like number 2. I don't know, it just made it, I think that sentence should broadly encompass the terrain that the recommendations do.
And just to clarify, the narrowing thing that you're worried about, is it just the word implement? So you want to suggest a different either verb or set of verbs?
I think so. We didn't get it. It just seemed to have.
Yeah.
Design and use is what I heard her say.
Yeah.
I think that's what was there before, though. So I guess right. I just wanted
so
to.
I think, wasn't there some, Kaja, are you about to speak?
I just want to be clear that Kathy, you're referencing a version that was not put before the committee.
Okay. So
it was not there before.
Okay, it was in my mind before. Apologies.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we can't have it now, right? That just means that we didn't resolve it.
So it was never in there. So if you want to include it, we can include it. That's up to the committee, obviously. Yeah. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, that this hasn't changed in between that, in between the last committee meeting and now.
Okay. Design and use.
But is it design that we're really talking about? I just want to make sure, because we're not actually talking about design. Yeah. Aren't we talking about like acquire and monitor and develop policies for? I don't think design is the right word. And use and implement don't strike me as different enough.
No, they're not different.
Yeah. So Kathy, is there another verb that captures the scope of what you
acquire? Could include all of that stuff. Acquire and use.
Yeah, I might need to see. I don't have language we've used in some of the recommendations below.
So should we scroll down just to take a look at what verbs we're talking about? Let's do that. So maybe let's just be on this first set of recommendations so we can see. So we have use, develop, implement, procure.
And acquire takes care of both developing and procuring.
Yeah.
But use is better than implement. It's only one syllable.
Yeah. But I think we might need something that captures like assess or monitor or something like that.
Yes. Acquire, use, and assess.
Mm-hmm. Do we need in this sentence to use the words retrospective review? Because otherwise this sentence strikes me as broader than what we're actually.
For retrospective.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
For, not in.
And do we call it retrospective review above, or are we calling it retrospective rulemaking, or what do we call it?
Retrospective review.
Okay, just want to make sure we're being consistent. Kathy, your hand is up. Is this a new hand or an old hand or an ongoing hand? Okay, is there anybody else who wants to weigh in on this paragraph, or indeed any other aspect of the preamble? Are we ready to take a vote?
Yes.
This is that exciting moment. Okay, Peter, I think I heard a motion from you before. Would you like to make a motion?
I move that we accept the recommendation.
Would somebody like to second this? James, I recognize you.
I second.
Thank you. All right, now, Kaja, can you remind me how we do this vote? Are we just doing a voice vote now, or we don't have to record anything? Or, oh, hold on. Was I supposed to give an opportunity for anybody who wasn't a committee member to speak? I think I might have been supposed to do that.
I mean, they could have raised their hand.
Okay. Okay. I've been giving lots of pauses for folks to raise. Okay, so that sounds fine. So, and we can just do a voice vote, right? There's nothing sort of super contentious here that requires us to record counting carefully who's on what side of stuff. Okay, so then I think why don't you take your mics, unmute yourself, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and unmute yourself if anybody wants to vote nay. So unmute yourself, and now's that opportunity. I think the ayes have it. Thank you for your excellent work.
Thank you.
Wow, amazing. Great job.
I am amazed. This is great. 357. Wow. We made a ton of progress, both last time where we waded through really some more deeply complicated definitional stuff, and also now. So thank you everybody for your participation. Kaja, do you want to release us from the share screen just so that we can see everybody's face for a second as we wave out?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So is there anything else formally that I have to do now other than end this meeting? I think I just need to end the meeting.
No, we're just going to end it, and then we will, put this forward for the council approval for the plenary.
Wonderful. All right.
Great.
Well, thank you everybody again, and I look forward to seeing you at the plenary.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it for your hard work. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Great work.
Thank you.